I'm Michael Stapleton. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Gild, and you're watching Ask the Experts. Marketing is essentially the process of maximizing perceived value for any target audience. Or in other words, really trying to get people to perceive the full value you can deliver. And if that's true, it's the same thing in recruiting. You're trying to get candidates to understand everything you have to offer. And that generally starts by thinking from their perspective. Because that's true, they're essentially the same framework. There are a lot of the same techniques, email marketing, events, but really the mindset, I think, is what's most similar. At least a lot of effective recruiting is, I believe. Practically, the marketing mindset, I think, is particularly helpful for recruiters when they're thinking about how to engage with candidates. Taking some time to pause and consider what you actually have to offer, even clarifying it on paper, making sure you understand the employer value proposition is really important. There's so much noise out there, and you can really differentiate your message by putting yourself in the prospect's shoes. So that's what I would say is practically true in any communication you're delivering to candidates, to make sure you're seeing it from their lens, what would attract you if you were in their shoes, and making sure that it's not generic. You have to go talk to them, understand the personalities. You're going to have different messages for different kinds of candidates too. If I'm going to try to recruit developers, the kinds of things that they're going to perceive as valuable in an employer are different, likely at least, from what I'm going to entice salespeople with. So actually getting to know them personally is probably a really good first step. And then I think you can test out different kinds of outreaches and just see what's making more of an impact. Brand is a really complicated concept. In general, I think people often think of a brand as just a name for a product or a company. And the formal definition is closer to a series of associations people make with a company or a product. And that can be all kinds of things, associations that come from all kinds of sources. So an employer brand is really the meaning that candidates place on your company when they think about working there. And that comes from a huge variety of activities, a lot of which is frankly not really under the control of an individual recruiter. The friends they have that might work there would impact the way that brand is seen. So the things that are in a control are really any kind of outreach done on an individual recruiter level, and then employer branding is becoming a much more popular discipline in companies as well. So for individual recruiters, that means that you really have to think about what you can promise in your brand and how you want to represent it. And remember that every time you write an email, pick up a phone, meet someone at an event, you are contributing to the overall brand impression that these people are receiving. The good thing about taking the time to build an employer brand is that the impressions that are left from a brand are kind of cumulative. So the longer you take the time to do that carefully and deliberatively, the more impactful it's going to be long term. The harder the easier it'll become to actually cut through the noise and create a favorable impression in candidates' minds. So a lot of times it's tough because it doesn't have an immediate payoff when you think about building an employer brand, but it certainly has a long-term impact that'll make your job easier, make you more successful, make candidates happier. The other thing I'd mention is that great brands are not just about a bunch of positive associations. The amount of hours you work, unlimited PTO, 401k plans, all of those benefits that can contribute to the way a brand is perceived are great, but they're not differentiating. So if you're really trying to get your brand to stay in the minds of candidates, you have to step back and think about what really is different. What is going to, in an email or when I meet someone, actually going to resonate with them and that they're going to remember. So I think a good example, it's probably overused, but it's still a good example, is Zappos, their CEO, every year emails all the employees and asks them what they think is good about working at Zappos and bad, and then publishes that in a book that is unedited every year. And anyone can buy it and read it. And that, I think, creates a sense of a brand that revolves around openness, trust. The impression it leaves on candidates is this has got to be a pretty positive place to work if if the CEO is willing to publish all of these things. And that's very different. That's not something you would normally get at companies. So that is a true differentiating activity. So those kinds of things, keeping them in mind and stressing them to make sure that you hold a unique spot in the prospect's mind. Social media there's been a lot of companies that have done this really well. I think it's particularly useful for more casual interactions with people. I think the first step is actually, as we talked about, getting to know your target audience, the candidates you're trying to reach out to. Figure out where they are. They're not all going to be on the same place. I would go to LinkedIn for certain professions and Twitter for others, and I would go farther. I would go to Quora for some. So finding out where they are first. And then I think you want to figure out how to explain all the benefits of your brand over time. Make sure it's a rich experience. Make sure there's photography. Make sure it's authentic. You shouldn't sound calculated. A lot of great companies are doing photos of events they have at teams. Kind of funny occurrences that happen throughout the day as tweets that over time do build a bigger portrait of what it's like to work there and help the brand. I think that's becoming more and more popular. I think Instagram is also becoming an increasingly popular channel that actually is being used directly on career pages, that is seen as a kind of a youthful media and very personal touch. I think social media, like we talked about, is really important. I think email marketing is important in the sense that great email marketers today don't write generic messages. They do target who they're reaching out to. I think, frankly, a lot of the marketing automation tools we use, we're seeing some of those principles being adopted in CRMs by hiring teams. So any kind of communication channel is pretty important. Events can be great, especially if you host events and give people a sense of your culture. Making sure at that point you're not just trying to get everyone there so you can tell them why they should work there. Show something more interesting that interests them. You want to more build awareness at that phase than try to directly recruit people. And then once you have the attention of people, then you can start doing more direct conversations about working at your employer. So I think a lot of the marketing tactics that we use today are applicable for recruiting with a lot of the same principles. I think there's actually very little difference when done well. I think that as more and more candidates are being reached out to, people are becoming increasingly desensitized. So it's more important than ever to reach out to people on a personal basis. And I think that also involves really remembering the bottom line, which is that you're trying to make successful hires. And while that could mean emailing 10,000 people, it could also mean meeting 30 really well-targeted and qualified people that come in the door. And not having irritated the other, 9,000, et cetera, that didn't respond to your email or didn't pay any attention to it. So I think we're continuing to see a trend back towards more sales skills in recruiting, and I think that's going to continue. So I think a lot of the recruiters that'll succeed are the ones that really do have that interpersonal skill and can connect directly with people.